reason why covering this steelbook hurts is because in order for me to open it, I need to then show... Some of you have recently watched my unboxing, or rather unwrapping, of my Spider-Man No Way Home 4K Best Buy exclusive steelbook, and that got me to thinking, well, I'll go ahead and do like a very brief collection overview of pretty much all of the Spider-Man related steelbooks that I currently own right now. And for the majority of them, they are based off of the cinematic interpretations of Spider-Man, save for one at the very end, which transcends into the video game format. And frankly, it's the only video game Spider-Man related steelbook that I currently own. Hopefully 2023 will see a change to that. But for now, let's take a very quick look at pretty much every Spider-Man steelbook that I currently own. Now, some of which you may have already seen me kind of cover on the channel, and therefore I might kind of brisk through them really fast, especially since they already have their own dedicated video and we've already kind of talked about them ad nauseum. And strangely enough, that's actually the steelbook set that we're going to start off with, which is, as you can see right here, the Spider-Man Legacy Collection, which is going to be a Best Buy exclusive at the time, because as you notice right there, this is actually a Blu-ray only steelbook. I understand that there's a 4K interpretation, which has a completely different aesthetic look to the overall design of the steelbook. At the time, I didn't have access to that. I didn't even have a 4K player, didn't even have a PS5 or what have you. So therefore, I gravitated towards the Blu-ray version. And frankly, I'm kind of glad that I did, because between the two, I actually like better, as I stated before in its own separate video, which you can go and check out. So I'm not going to delve too much into this set right here because I've already talked about it. But it's actually one of the shinier portions of my steelbook set collection, not only for Spider-Man, but pretty much steelbooks overall, because I like the uniformity between the two steelbooks that house the Tobey trilogy as well as the two Andrew Garfield films. And though I wish that the quality was up to par as far as the translation of the movies themselves to 4K and not be at Blu-ray, I at least got in return a much better steelbook set, in my opinion, than the one for the 4K. Because the 4K, it's not bad, there's just a lot going along. It's very loud, very colorful, it's kind of in your face as far as the design of how they designed that legacy version in the 4K, whereas here in Blu-ray, you have these, the Tobey Maguire Spidey here with the red symbol, and then for the back, where you have the Andrew Garfield set, you have a much more blue aesthetic with the spider symbol as well as the Andrew Garfield Spidey lunging there towards the front of the steelbook cover art. So I liked how much better they work with each other and then complement each other versus the other version of the 4K interpretation, and therefore I liked this version better, and therefore it's one of my favorites amongst this set. And therefore I will stop saying therefore. My apologies for going a little crazy with that word. Then we get to not only one of my favorite steelbooks, but also one of my favorite Spider-Man movies, just period. And that is going to be for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is probably my first time covering this steelbook on the channel, and it's definitely one of my favorites. Once again, similar to that of the Legacy Collection over here, I'm a little bummed that they decided to opt the steelbook towards the Blu-ray version of the movie from Best Buy rather than the 4K. And this is really strange, because at the time, 4K was, of course, fully released. You had 4K Blu-rays, so I don't understand why they couldn't put the steelbook towards that version versus just having it be Blu-ray only. Like, the 4K version came out simultaneously on the same day. Don't understand why they needed to have that be. I don't know if there was some kind of agreement, but nevertheless, you get the Blu-ray, the DVD, and the digital copies found in this beautiful matte finish with Spider-Man kind of jumping here towards the screen with his graffiti symbol on the back that you can see parts of, but if you want to see the full symbol, you can then turn the steelbook around and have that beautiful design right there on a black backdrop. When you then turn it to the side, you of course have the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse logo sporting the spine, and upon opening the steelbook itself, not only are you greeted with the voucher as well as the discs, but upon removing the discs, you will then be greeted to a really cool stylized inside artwork that I really, really like. It kind of sports that kind of monochromatic look, or not really monochromatic because you get multiple colors, but kind of like that pop art, cel-shaded look to have it look kind of like a comic book panel, similar to whenever something kind of drastic happens in the movie via its art style, specifically where he kind of jumps off that car when he's being chased by the Prowler and the screen just goes, it just kind of flashes this new aesthetic really briefly on screen. You can see that being used in full force here for the inside artwork, and I'm loving it. Okay, the next two films I feel like I need to explain myself because yes, they are not necessarily the best received movies related to almost anything Spider-Man, but in my defense, the reason why I decided to, as the kids say, cop these steelbooks is because tragically, as bad as the movies are, and trust me, I concur that they are really bad movies, though the sequel may be better than the first, but that's like saying that you actually had a solid bowel movement versus the diarrhea that you had last week. They at least were able to churn out, or pinch out, to stay true to that idiom, two really awesome steelbooks as Best Buy exclusives, starting off with Venom from the 2018 film. And it's crazy to see and really ironic that a very, very mediocre film actually ends up with a really sick steelbook. I mean, just look at this. Just look at this. I really wish I knew who the artist was. I don't see any kind of autograph or signage on the cover. They usually put them and kind of hide them. And oh no, they're in the back. It's right here. It starts with an A. It says 2018. But I'll definitely try to do my due diligence in looking them up. But you do have their autograph there on the back of the cover. And huge props to whoever the artist is, because this is one of the most badass steelbooks that I'm proud of owning, despite the discrepancy of the actual film it's actually enclosing. So at least it sports a really awesome design of Venom's side profile there, using almost kind of like watercolor kind of design to the artwork and the drawing and the painting of the profile itself. And of course, upon closer inspection, you can definitely see the word Venom written out inside of the tendrils of his jaw, and that is just very much akin to the character as well as the actual look of the design work itself. So that's the cover gracing the front. Of course, you saw the Venom logo on the spine, and as I kind of teased a little earlier with the autograph, you have now this artwork sporting the back with the canister holding the symbiote goo and coming out from here towards the back. And if you look a little closely, it's very subtle, but you can see Venom's kind of outline of his face kind of being hinted at right there at the top. Or could it be Riot instead? Who knows? But that's pretty much the outside of the steelbook. Now, when you do open it up, however, we then get treated to a perfect analogy of the film itself. As flashy as it is on the outside, very empty and drab on the inside, because it's absolutely nothing inside for the inside artwork except this blue backdrop. Frankly, I thought that maybe that was just going to be a fluke, a one-time thing for the steelbook outing of a Venom film. But whoever they probably got to handle the artwork for the first Venom steelbook, they either got them back or decided to go for a similar approach in giving us the steelbook for Venom Let There Be Carnage. Again, not a great film, but just look at this cover. Just look at it. With Venom going toe-to-toe with Carnage himself and sporting a very beautiful hand-drawn kind of art style to the two of them kind of melding together with really saturated colors and stencil techniques that just kind of, like I said, it just pops. And because of that, I just couldn't look at the steelbook and go, yeah, I'm going to pass up on it. No, it actually looks legit enough for me to go ahead and own and have it be put upon my shelf of steelbooks. Because even though, again, the quality of the film itself could be argued, no one can deny the awesomeness of that cover right there with the Venom Let There Be Carnage logo there at the bottom. You, of course, have the logo once more on the spine. However, when we move towards the back is where we start to see just a little bit of a missed opportunity, because instead they opted to just repeat the front cover on the back here, only a bit more zoomed in to then focus on the profile shots of Venom and Carnage. We then have the artist signature right there. It definitely looks a lot different than the one from the original steelbook for Venom, so for the first Venom, so it's probably going to be a different artist. Still, the idea that they brought to the table here is awesome. It just looks like that was the only idea really utilized, because upon opening the steelbook and removing the discs, you then have pretty much the exact same layout for the inside of the artwork, only this time it's not hand-drawn, but rather a CG render of the characters from the movie itself. So my issue with the wasted opportunity on the back then gets extended towards the inside here, because ultimately they just used the same exact image. Even the same image used for the artwork of the disc for the 4K version. So a little bit more could have been utilized there, but at least we were left with a really cool cover on the front. Terrible artwork for the Blu-ray disc right here. And then, of course, on the side goes the voucher for the film that I don't believe I've ever redeemed. So, finders keepers for whoever watches this video first. Now, we're coming down to the wire, and of course, in doing so, we're getting to the Tom Holland trilogy. Now, this next one is a little hurtful to cover, because this is going to be the steelbook for Spider-Man Homecoming in its 4K release. So it's good to see that we're going all the way in terms of formatting with the highest quality possible, 4K plus Blu-ray and digital copy. And the cover art itself is awesome because, as we all know, it's become a stuff of memes to have the posters for the Tom Holland films be absolutely terrible, to say the least. Like, there's some of those floaty head posters they've designed for both not only the theatrical release, but also the covers of the Blu-ray and 4K releases themselves as well. That just leaves very little to the imagination. So it's good to see that concept art that was designed by Ryan Maynarding has been utilized for the steelbook release of the Spider-Man Homecoming film, with Spider-Man leaping here into the sky via Iron Man's help with propelling, his web strand right there. Iron Man coming here to help him out. You see, of course, his friendly neighborhood there in the back using this really nice hand-painted kind of art style. As we then move on over towards the spine, you have the very, very tiny logo right there. I really wish that they would kind of follow suit with the way that they did with No Way Home and make the logo just a little bit more apparent. But upon rotating it towards the back is, in my opinion, my favorite part, which is showcasing a snippet here of the climax of Vulture fighting Spider-Man in his homemade suit with a giant profile, a very ominous looking profile of Vulture's helmet here on the top left corner. And overall, this image right here is rather striking with the Stark Tower there in the back, the rain kind of pouring here from the finale. And ultimately, it just looks badass. It just really, really looks cool and very, very good use of color. The reason why covering this steelbook hurts is because in order for me to open it, I need to then show the evolution in being a steelbook collector, which is that the majority of these people that work for certain retailers that have exclusivity rights to some of these steelbooks are working like they don't give a flying but we do, okay? We're paying money for these things. Now, in their defense, I actually bought this in store. I didn't have it shipped. I actually kind of was a little late to the party with the Homecoming steelbook here, and I found this in store. It wasn't until I got home and unwrapped the thing that it just kind of fell upon me at the spine. And therefore, now I have two steelbook plates that make up the Homecoming steelbook. Now, David, why didn't you just go return and exchange? Because, like I said, I was a little late to the steelbook. Finding this thing in the store was months after the I think I want to say almost like a year or two after this steelbook was actually released in home media. So I want to say it was somewhere in 2018 that I happened to find this steelbook when the site already listed it as sold out. And because of that, this steelbook being in store was actually an error. On the site it said sold out, but I was able to walk into this Best Buy and I just happened to come across it. So you're kind of getting the idea here. This was a rare find. There's no way to return it. If I return it, yeah, I get my money back, but I don't get a steelbook. Therefore, I must capitulate, if you will, and just concede to owning a broken Homecoming steelbook, because there's not going to be any kind of workaround here. I can't exchange it. I was able to return. I had the ability to return it at the time, but I rather just let go of that money and keep this steelbook, because despite the break here in the middle, the rest of it is in pretty decent condition. And since I already happen to have the digital copy of Homecoming, I figured, you know what, at least this steelbook can have a home somewhere in my shelf, looking very nicely next to the remaining 2 steelbooks of the Tom Holland trilogy. Now, I do wish that they would have at least gotten a little bit more imaginative with the inside, because beyond the discs, you can see right here that the background kind of sports this blueprint style kind of design here on the inside of the art. So not much in the way of great artwork for the inside of the spine, but at least it reinforces my notions of wanting to keep this thing closed to then not show just how
Flip.
it is. But on the bright side, my steelbook of Spider-Man Far From Home fared better, which is funny because the circumstances of me coming across the steelbook were kind of similar to that of Homecoming. I came to this one kind of late, but what also helped was a sale that pretty much marked the whole thing half off. So it was no question that I was going to be able to add this to my collection, especially knowing that there was a very, very likely steelbook coming for No Way Home, and owning Homecoming, I figured I'd complete the set and throw in the Far From Home steelbook here. Now, one thing that I wish that they would have changed up, and to kind of keep a sense of uniformity amongst the 3 steelbooks, is that this would have been made out with a matte finish versus the glossy that it's got going on. It's the only glossy one out of the 3. But I will say that despite the slight head floatiness of the way that everything is kind of composed here design-wise, at least they retained, again, that kind of hand-drawn art style to the way that everybody's painted here, with the amalgamation of the characters, Spider-Man swinging in the middle with his new advanced suit, and then little snippets of the climax and certain set pieces here in the background there. Then we turn it to the side. We have, once again, another small Spider-Man Far From Home logo that I wish that they would have made out a little bit bigger. But then we rotate and we get a similar kind of back art style to that of the front, with set pieces going on here in the back. Mysterio attacking Hydra Man, and then not the Sandman, but a sand monster from the beginning here in the top left corner. MJ and Peter walking the bridge here on the right. And then what was his name? Night Monkey swinging into action there at the bottom. I'll admit I'm a little insecure by how much the steelbook is kind of popping here in my hands, so hopefully nothing is going to be befalling this steelbook similar to that of the Homecoming one. But upon removing the digital code that I have not used, because I actually already have a digital copy of Far From Home, so whoever watches this video first, have fun right there. And then removing the discs then lead us to a similarly simple art style here for the inside of the steelbook, similar to that of Homecoming, where we just have strands of webbing upon a black background. So as you can see, it's becoming a bit of a running thing for the Tom Holland trilogy. And that ultimately leads us to our most recent entry, which I've already covered, is of course Spider-Man No Way Home steelbook with the matte finish. Now, one thing that I do want to take this opportunity to talk about is that, as many of you pointed out in the comments, something that I was blind to in all the hype of me finally acquiring my steelbook for Spider-Man No Way Home, despite the reservations I have about the design and the overall composition, I failed to then notice those 3 slight little dents on the left side of the steelbook. So shout out to all of you that were pointing that out in the comments. I just failed to really see that, an oversight on my end, and thank you for pointing that out. And yes, it does echo the fact that people who work over at Best Buy are just not really caring, especially with the way that pandemic has kind of strained the way that we view labor work for at the bare minimum wage, and that's going to be reflected on the way people handle packages and do their work. So therefore, I will admit it's a very difficult practice collecting steelbooks, because for the majority of the ones that are going to be in high demand, they're only going to be available for shipping. they're not going to be available for store pickup. Very seldom are there going to be some that are going to allow for store pickup, and that's definitely the way to go so that you don't run the risk of potential damage to your steelbooks because you're going to be the one picking them up. Nevertheless, there's always the possibility of it happening because even if you select store pickup, they still need to reach the store somehow. And somewhere along the way, there's gonna be that careless worker who's just gonna throw the tote or throw the box. Trust me, I work there, and I've seen with my eyes firsthand how careless some of those workers can be because ultimately it's not their products, it's not their items. So unless you pay them more, they're not going to care more. And sadly, my copy here of the No Way Home Steelbook took the brunt of it. But as I already mentioned in a separate video, I still enjoyed that I managed to get myself a version. And there's still things to like about the Steelbook. There's just things on the subjective side that I wish that they would have changed a little bit for this turnaround of the ultimate Spidey movie, especially when we're dealing with the inside artwork, which I've already covered on that separate video. So if you guys want to hear more in-depth thoughts of how I feel about the Spider-Man No Way Home Steelbook, check that video out. And ultimately, that leads us with our final Spider-Man Steelbook. However, that's actually it for the films. We're left then with the Spider-Man PlayStation 4 Insomniac Steelbook for the game. Now, this is not a Steelbook sold separately. This came with my collector's edition of the PlayStation 4 Spider-Man game. And as you can see, they went with a much more minimalistic approach. You just have the white symbol of the Insomniac spider symbol here on a red backdrop. And that's it. And here's the thing. By itself, it is a very clean and sleek look to the front cover of the Steelbook. I just wish that minimalistic approach didn't go further along to not only the back, but also the spine. It's one thing to have the back just be just the full-on red background here and nothing else. It's also another for me to get a little peeved by the complete abstain of any kind of spider logo or Spider-Man Marvel logo here on the spine. Like, nothing to tell me that this is the game except for me just knowing firsthand that this is the Spider-Man PS4 Steelbook. Because for anybody that would see this on the shelf, and if this is being covered up by other Steelbooks or other things, no one's going to notice that this is the Spider-Man Steelbook. So it would have been nice to have some kind of text or some kind of logo or something just here on the spine. I always get kind of irked whenever Steelbooks do this. And I noticed it's a common practice with video game Steelbooks as opposed to movie ones. However, they were able to then get back into my good graces by showing us a really cool design choice for the inside of the cover by having Spidey grace hit with his default and iconic selfie pose on top of the Empire State Building. And if you play the game, you know that this is very, very much one of the funnest things to do in the game is not only take selfies or just pictures overall with your cell phone, but also just mess around with the photo mode and having the absolute sense of freedom, being able to toggle all the different little features that Insomniac was able to bake in to the photo mode on top of the other things that they got right for what is quintessentially the Spider-Man game. And like I said, this is the only Spider-Man game-related Steelbook that I own, but I'm hoping that 2023 will see the change to that via the sequel, Marvel's Spider-Man 2. And if I'm able to help it, I will definitely be adding whatever Steelbook comes in that collector's edition to my collection. And with that, we are pretty much done with all of the Steelbooks I own for pretty much all the Spider-Man related content that deems it worthy of being added to said Steelbook collection. So if you guys have any of your own, please sound them off in the comment section below. What's your favorite Steelbook that you own, whether it be Spider-Man or Batman related, or hell, any kind of Steelbook, period. Let me know what your guys' proudest additions to your collections are in the comment section. Check out this other Steelbook related video showing up on screen right now. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Stay humble. I'll see you on the next one.